Hey guys, this is Miss Vinian, and we are doing U.S. History Review on the chart that I gave you in class, or you can find it on the website. So we're just going to go through the pictures, and I'll help you with the answers here. So topic on this one is political machines. This is during the Gilded Age. This is, if you want to skip over to important facts, this is, or important people, this is Boss Tweed, and he led the Tweed Ring. So before this, there was a rise of new immigrants, and new immigrants got their jobs from political machines. Political machines basically controlled the government atmosphere at the time. After this, they put new initiatives in like the secret ballot, and the progressive era was on the rise. This also includes like the 17th Amendment, which was the direct election of senators, so it helped lessen corruption in local government politics. Some important facts is that this is Boss Tweed, and he ran the Tweed Ring. He helped build the Brooklyn Bridge, which is actually a really successful thing for Manhattan and Brooklyn to be connected together. But he basically stole a lot of money out of that by saying that it was more to make than it actually was. Some important people, obviously it's Boss Tweed, and then any Gilded Age president would be good to list out here. And then please don't forget that this cartoon was drawn by Thomas Nast. Thomas Nast is the one who's responsible for bringing down political machines, specifically Boss Tweed. Okay, so the next one is an example of, the topic is Gilded Age, and it's an example of new versus old immigrants. So on the left we have the Irish, and on the right we have the Japanese, who came here for the railroads. So you can write that under important facts. So they are swallowing Uncle Sam. So this is actually an example of nativism. So before this happened, you have immigrants coming in because of the Industrial Revolution and that there's factory jobs and the American dream. After this, we have a rise of nativism as well as the Chinese Exclusion Act and immigration laws. Okay, so there you have that. Some important facts with this is that they came over, this is the Japanese and this is the Irish that came over specifically to help build those railroads. And some important facts also are to remember that Asians came through Angel Island in San Francisco, so AA, and then Europeans came through Ellis Island, so EE. That's a good way to remember that there. Some important people during this time with new versus old immigrants would be Jane Addams, as she helped immigrants kind of settle through what they called settlement houses. Jacob Riis, he showed how immigrants were living. Any of the presidents at that time would be helpful to know. All right, third topic is Jim Crow. So this is the actual, it says Mr. T. Rice as Jim Crow. He's a white man dressed up as a black man in blackface. So under important facts, you can write Jim Crow started as a white man making fun of a black man, and really his intention was to try to make whites think that blacks were ignorant and fools. So this is the topic then would be we're in the Reconstruction / Gilded Age, and this is Jim Crow laws. So before Jim Crow laws, during Reconstruction, black people were free for a small amount of time. After Jim Crow laws, it is separate but equal. And the important fact you need to know there is Plessy versus Ferguson court case, which made it legal for segregation. Some other important facts would be this is also during the rise of the KKK. Sharecropping was occurring at this time. Some important people you may need to know are the people who are trying to lead the civil rights movement at that time, and that's Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. All right, picture 4 is Teddy Roosevelt, who is mucking up the meat scandal. So for topics, you're going to want progressive era, and then you can put, for the actual real topic of this, would be maybe the square deal and the meat scandal. So before this, businesses were unregulated. So they could do basically whatever they wanted. They could treat their workers how they wanted. They could let rats run all over the meat and not figure out what was in the meat. This also, you have the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, just working conditions were bad. So after this, the government gets involved in businesses and make sure that the people are protected and that we're protected through things like the FDA. So you can put that in important facts. FDA, the Square Deal by Teddy Roosevelt, the 3 C's, all of that's really important. So those 3 C's were control corporations, then we have consumer protection, and then conservation of resources. Important people would be Teddy Roosevelt. Another one would be Upton Sinclair, who was a muckraker and wrote the book The Jungle. And then we have somebody else would be Lincoln Steffens, who tried to take down the men who built America. Okay. Number 5, this is, we have Teddy Roosevelt fighting William Howard Taft over the presidency. This is a chair. And then down here it says the disputed chair, TR to Taft. I only lent it to you anyways, is what it said. So here we're talking about Teddy Roosevelt did not want to run a 3rd term, so he handpicked William Howard Taft to run. He didn't like the way he was doing it, so he went and he ran for another 3rd term. So before this, Teddy Roosevelt was president, and he did not want to run for a 3rd term. So the after of this is that Teddy Roosevelt creates a 3rd party, which is the Bull Moose Party, the Progressive Party. Important facts about this is that William Howard Taft and him don't get along because Teddy Roosevelt wanted him to do what he wanted him to do, but Taft actually was really against monopolies and trusts, and he took them all out. Some important people, William Howard Taft and Teddy Roosevelt. All right, this picture here is picture 6, and it is gunboat diplomacy is the topic during imperialism. And if you look at this picture, we have the Teddy Roosevelt big stick. So before this, this is the rise of imperialism in the world, and America kind of wants their part. So after this, you're going to see America very involved in other countries and just trying to control the Western Hemisphere. So that's called the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Important facts is that his diplomacy was called big stick diplomacy or gunboat diplomacy, and it was speak softly and carry a big stick. So be nice to others, but use force when necessary. Another important fact would be the Great White Fleet, or you could also talk about dollar diplomacy or moral diplomacy by the other presidents. Important people, Teddy Roosevelt, let's see, William Jennings Bryan was against it, Mark Twain was against it, but then we also had William Howard Taft and Woodrow Wilson, who were, Taft had dollar diplomacy and Wilson had moral diplomacy. Question 7. This is Vote No on Suffrage. This is an ad in a paper for anti-suffrage. It's against the 19th Amendment. So this is the Roaring Twenties and 19th Amendment. So the before of this is you could put the 15th Amendment, which only allowed African Americans the right to vote, African American males, but did not allow women to vote. So after this is the 19th Amendment, where women then have the right to vote, and that actually leads to women holding political office. So important facts about this is that Tennessee was the last state to ratify the amendment, and that, there's about 4 or 5 different voting amendments to our Constitution. Some important people, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth. So this was a majority black and white movement, and we'll talk about that more when we get back in January. Next, number 8, Save Seiko and Vanzetti. This is basically a picture from the Roaring Twenties, and this is about anti-immigrant bias. The topic is nativism. So before this, we see an influx of immigrants, specifically from Southeastern Europe and Asia, and those are what we call the new immigrants. After this, you see a rise of nativism, and you see laws like immigration laws and the rise of the second KKK. Some important facts that go with this is that Seiko and Vanzetti were from Italy. They were charged with highly circumstantial evidence, and it's an example of anti-immigrant bias. Oh, wait, sorry. The important people on this is Seiko and Vanzetti, and then also you're going to want to know the Palmer raids, which were when they deported people illegally. All right, so picture number 10 has to do, the topic is World War I, and specifically the Versailles Treaty. And so this is what's going to end World War I. So before this is World War I, and we know that the Central Powers lose, and Germany is not invited to Versailles for the treaty. So because Germany after is so heavily punished, so you can write after war reparations and that Germany is punished, this is going to lead to the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany. Some important facts about this, the Versailles Treaty is that Woodrow Wilson wrote the 14 points, and part of that was the League of Nations, but it failed. Some important people would be Woodrow Wilson, and then we also have Adolf Hitler here. Okay. 10 is topic is World War I. The specific topic is trench warfare. So before this, there is what do they use for weaponry? They use guns. They use horses. But after World War I and during World War I, this becomes a very, very technologically advanced sport. There is mustard gas, there is tanks, there is machine guns, and you can put all that in the important facts. And that's why I wanted to represent with the gas masks. Some important facts are that the Allied powers won, and that the Germans were always the first to have the more modern weapons. Some important people would be General Jack Black Pershing, Alvin C. York, who is the hero from Tennessee, and Woodrow Wilson. All right, 11 is Plessy versus Ferguson. So the topic here this is actually part of the civil rights movement, and so you could put, this is actually during Gilded Age. So the topic is making Jim Crow laws legal, so separate but equal. And so before this, African Americans were free after Reconstruction. After this, it makes it so segregation is legal. Some important facts about this is that most southern states didn't stop the which is essentially Jim Crow laws, until like the 1950s and 60s, and Plessy versus Ferguson is not overturned until 1954, which is when Brown versus Board of Education said that it was unconstitutional. Okay, this one is a picture of Prohibition. This is like the day before Prohibition. So this is, you're going to have topic is Roaring Twenties and Prohibition. So before this, people were really, really concerned about alcohol on society. And there was a lot of saloons, there was a lot of things going on. People were pretty much addicted to alcohol. So they wanted society to be better. So after we have Prohibition, and that's in the 18th Amendment. And important facts about this is the rise of organized crime. And the government also loses a lot of money because they're not able to tax alcohol. Okay. And some important people would be that Woodrow Wilson passed this amendment, but the person who helped repeal it was Franklin D. Roosevelt. And then an important person also would be Al Capone, who was the biggest gangster of the time. All right, so this is number 13, and this is, the topic is Roaring Twenties and airplanes. So before this, people traveled by train, and after this, this is going to increase people's worldwide travel, and this is going to increase communication. Important facts would be that weaponry, during World War I, planes were used for support, and in World War II, they were used as jets. And then also important people is Charles Lindbergh right here. He's the first man to do the transatlantic flight across from New York to Paris. All right, number 15 is the rise of so this one right here, before is the first KKK and after is the new KKK. So the first KKK, so this is the before. The first KKK is against blacks having the right to vote in the 1860s. The rise of the second KKK in the 1920s is about anti-immigrant bias, but it also includes blacks as well. So remember, it's Catholics, Jews, anybody in unions, communists, socialists, anybody basically who wasn't Protestant, white. Okay, and so important facts about this would be lynchings that occurred, that they tried to recruit members in the 20s in a very passive-aggressive way. Okay, and some important people are just going to be our civil rights leaders that kind of help bring notice to this. And so we have Ida B. Wells, we have some of our civil rights activists, W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. Awesome. So number 16 topic is Roaring Twenties and then evolution. So before this, states mandated teachers teach creationism and not the scientific theory of evolution. And so after this evolution scopes monkey trial is what they call it, states, really didn't change their minds until the 60s, where evolution started being able to be taught. But the significance of this is that this shows how people are trying to progress in the 20s, and then how people are also trying to stay the same, trying to keep their conservative values. So some important facts of this is John Scopes was the teacher. We had Clarence Darrow, who was agnostic, and then William Jennings Bryan was the prosecutor, and he made himself out to be an expert witness, which is why people made fun of it, because it's very difficult to be an expert witness of the Bible if you weren't there. So those were important facts and important people. Okay. Then we have Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. So this would be early civil rights leaders. And so before this, you're going to see that African Americans in Reconstruction are free, but then they move towards, the South moves